And that's where I've got Anton Muscatelli's report here. Is there a big idea in it?
Look, absolutely. How we take the focus from us thinking about Scotland as one block and instead empowering the regions of Scotland is really important. Secondly, how we end this kind of economics free zone in Scotland. That would be a criticism I'd make of the entire period of devolution, and in particular the last almost 20 years under the SNP. But I think in the entire period of devolution, it's largely felt like it's a social policy parliament rather than economic policy parliament. And I think that's been to the detriment of our businesses, of our economy, and therefore the fruits of that to invest in our public services.
A big debate 10 years ago during the independence referendum.
Well, this is talking about Scotland as it is, and it's talking about the powers and the levers we have to do things differently. Scotland has significant levers, but we don't use them.
What's the big idea in it?
So we don't use them to maximum effect.
What's its big idea?
So a few things within that. One is how do we reform our planning system so we can get faster decision making, we can build the homes we need in our country. Second, how do we declutter the landscape of our enterprise agencies so we can drive growth in every part of the country. Third is how do we have an economics directorate that sits at the heart of a First Minister's office. So
none of these seem like a big idea.
So growth isn't just
but none of these seem like a really big idea. There's stuff that's been talked about for years. There's no big idea among them, is there?
What I'd say is perhaps you can take that with the person that wrote the report in terms of Professor Sir Anton Muscatelli, is Scotland's leading economist, and what he's making clear is I don't think the answer to this is somehow to say there is one silver bullet that delivers the economic growth and the prosperity we need in our country. This is a serious piece of work that looks at all the layers we have and levers we have in our country and how do we use them to maximum effect. And I mentioned some of them already. There is planning, there is transport, there is skills, our enterprise agencies, regional economic development, and so much more that we can use to maximum effect to benefit people in Scotland. And it demonstrates that we're serious about winning an election in 6 months' time, and we're serious about governing differently. End of the sticky plasters, end of the can't-do attitude from the SNP. Let's take a new approach and unleash opportunities across the country.
It places a lot of store on devolving more power from Holyrood to councils. Do you trust the councils to deliver on economic development?
So part of it is properly funding local government, and I think we do have to have trust in different layers of government.
So you'd give more money to local government?
Well, absolutely we have to give more resources to local government, and there has to be greater partnership between councils as well, and there has to be greater partnership and collaboration between the UK government, Scottish government and local government.
So how much more of the budget would you give to local government then?
Well, look, we will set out our proposals in advance of the election. These are recommendations we're looking at that have come in from Professor Anton Muscatelli.
Well, you're accepting his recommendations largely, aren't you?
Well, look, we're going to consider his recommendations, but I struggle to see any disagreement in the recommendations that he's making. And one of those key recommendations is how do we empower every single part of the country to make sure we get growth in every part. And I'll give you an example of that. So right now we have legislation, regulation that comes from Edinburgh that often feels like it's designed for Edinburgh, but everyone else has to pay the same impact. When the economic model for Glasgow will be different from Edinburgh, and the economic model for Edinburgh will be different from the Highlands and Islands, and just like it'll be different for the south of Scotland. How do we recognise the different challenges and different needs in different parts of the country so we can get the maximum benefit?
One of the specific things he talks about, and this is Scotland-wide, on page 22, he says Scotland now has chronic demographic challenges around population decline, posing significant risks to the country's fiscal, economic and social resilience. Have you got a solution to that?
Well, he's right, and that's why we have to fix our immigration system, which is currently broken. We've got to have an immigration system that works for every part of the country, but crucially, we have to match it.
It doesn't work for Scotland, and he says that the Scottish and UK governments have to collaborate on this. There's absolutely no sign of that, is there?
Well, that's because we currently have a government in Scotland who want to make a virtue out of difference and disagreement rather than two governments that generally want to work together. And that's one of the benefits that will come from a change of government here in Scotland is the instinct will not to be can't do, the instinct won't be to pick a fight, the instinct will be what can we do to maximise the benefit for Scotland.
Yeah, but you don't
you mentioned skills.
You can't
matching it to our skill system is also really, really important because we've got to train up our own so we can get them out there benefiting themselves, benefiting their families, but also benefiting the businesses and the low-hanging fruits of growth we have here in Scotland.
Well, on that very point, the Scottish Government wants to recruit social care workers from abroad, but the Labour government policy doesn't allow that right now.
But what we've got to do is have a skill system that works, proper pay of our social care workforce.
But hang on,
it can't be the case, Colin.
But there's a
that
chronic demographic challenge, according to Sir Anton Muscatelli. And you're saying that, yes, the governments have to work together. There's an area where they could and they're not.
Well,
because the UK government won't play.
You mentioned care workers. We can't chronically underpay our care workers and then say we're not going to match it with a skills system that trains up our care workers and pays them properly, but we're going to make up for it by purely having an immigration system that gets care workers from other parts of the world. Often in underdeveloped parts of the world, we take away their care workers in order to feed our own care system. It has to be a balanced approach. So we've got to have an immigration system that works for every part of the country. We've got to have an immigration system that works for the sectors that there are gaps, but crucially it has to be linked to a skills system that properly trains up our own and properly pays care workers so we can attract them into a valuable sector.
He says that Scotland's higher marginal income tax rates could be a major disincentive in attracting high-value jobs. Now, it's anecdotal, but do you agree with him? Do you think that is putting off people coming to work in Scotland? Do you think it's putting off employers from locating in Scotland?
Well, Professor Muscatelli makes the point that in gathering evidence for his report, he heard from countless businesses and those involved in advocating a different approach in the economy, that there was negative impacts of the higher tax rates, particularly for those earning around £30,000 to £33,000 and above, because it was pushing talent away and failing to attract talent. So I accept the premise of that, and therefore we have got to find a more balanced tax system that recognises the challenges we face here in Scotland and use it in a way that doesn't just see tax as a easy lever to use, but instead has a coordinated system around getting growth and attracting talent.
Would you cut income tax?
Look, it's not as simple as saying we would cut income tax, because we have to look at the public services we have to fund. We have to look at the growth gap that exists in our country. If we can address the growth gap, and what I mean by that is, and again it's referenced in Professor Muscatelli's report, is because of the SNP's failure to use the economic levers in Scotland, we are missing out on £1 billion of tax receipts that could be spent on our public services.
You're sounding a bit like the Chancellor in terms of your commitments and your not commitments. Will you be speaking to the Chancellor in the next few weeks ahead of the budget? Will you be speaking to the Chancellor?
I speak to the Chancellor regularly.
Will you be speaking to the Chancellor or the Prime Minister in the next couple of weeks ahead of the budget?
Well, of course, I speak to the Chancellor and the Prime Minister regularly. I know there's lots of speculation about the budget, but going back to the point you were making earlier on, income tax is one of the taxes that is the responsibility of the Scottish Government. The Scottish Government sets income tax rates, and I believe we do need to reform our tax system in Scotland to make it work for our sectors and our businesses here, just like we have to reform our rate system, because right now it's rigged against the high street.
So you will be talking to the Chancellor over the next couple of weeks. What are you going to be trying to influence her on?
Well, the key parts for what we're looking for from the Chancellor is, I've made clear to them in public and in private that this has to be an unashamedly Labour budget. It has to be recognising that there might be difficult decisions to make. Any of those difficult decisions have to be rooted in fairness and in Labour values so we can get the outcomes we want.
But what specifically will you be lobbying her on? Will you be lobbying her against a 2p increase in income tax in England, Wales and Northern Ireland, for example? Because that might be a disbenefit to Scotland.
The strongest lobby for income tax rises in England and Wales has been coming from John Swinney.
I'm asking you if you will be lobbying her.
What I want is to see a budget that will reduce poverty, that will improve living standards, will make sure there's no return.
You're not arguing for anything specific. You're not going to be lobbying her on anything specifically.
No, that's not what I've said, Colin.
You're not telling me what you are lobbying her on.
So I want to see poverty come down, and obviously we know about the two-child benefit cap. My view on that, I want to see living standards improve. That includes, for example, around energy. I want to see no return to austerity. That means
will you lobby her on
income spending reviews.
Will you lobby her on income tax?
Well, income tax is a tax that is set in Scotland.
Yes.
Scotland decides income tax rates in Scotland.
And if she increases income tax by 2p, the Fraser Allander Institute reckon it would cost over £1 billion. If you were in government next year, it would cost you over £1 billion from your government budget. So are you going to lobby her on that?
I'm not going to speculate on
I'm not asking you to speculate. I'm asking you to tell me whether you'll lobby her on it or not.
Income tax in England and Wales
I'm not asking
is
you to
matter
speculate.
for the Chancellor.
I'm absolutely not asking you to speculate.
Scotland is decided by the Finance Secretary.
I'm not asking you to speculate.
I'm answering your question. The person that's advocating for income tax rise in England and Wales is John Swinney, and he's the man that negotiated the fiscal framework.
So you can't tell me right now whether you will lobby the Chancellor on that or not?
So I'm making clear they have to be Labour choices, but it would be inappropriate.
I'm asking you your choice.
No, what I'm saying is Scottish income tax is set in Scotland. The idea that we should set the rates of income tax for England and Wales and it shouldn't be a decision for England and Wales, could you imagine if that was the other way around and there was a finance secretary in Westminster telling what the income tax rate should be for Scotland, or the Welsh finance secretary was telling us what the income tax rate should be in Scotland? Income tax rates in Scotland are set by the SNP and the Scottish Government, and I want to change that SNP government in 6 months' time.
And Asawa, thanks for joining
My
us
pleasure.
in Scotland
Thank
tonight.
You.